before City Council. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Certainly. Honorable Mayor Lansing.
Here.
Alderman Feidler is absent. Alderman Morris is absent. Alderman Newman.
Here.
Alderman Rummel.
Here.
Alderman Tack.
Here.
Alderman Reisenberg.
Here.
Alderman Moreno.
Here.
Alderman Bushman.
Here.
Mr. Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Would you please all rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First item of business is reports of the city officers, starting with the mayor, myself, and
Excuse me, while we turn off our
lot of modern
devices.
technology here. First thing, I would like to introduce Todd Nahigian of Croya, who has, we have a Spirit of Croya essay contest and thereby a scholarship winner to report on. Todd.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you, and Alderman, appreciate being here. It's become a wonderful tradition to bring forth to you the winner of the Margot Martino Spirit of Croya Essay Scholarship winner. This year's winner is an exciting young woman who has definitely been a huge part of Croya. Her legacy will live on. She was the chairman of Croya this year. Her name is Maddie Moore. She did a wonderful job leading the meetings every week. She's been a retreat leader and she's been involved in numerous service projects. This essay that she wrote was picked by her peers, and we definitely appreciate the meaning behind it, as well as the amusing moments, but also want to thank her for a wonderful number of years and dedication to Croya. This year, Croya, we had, again, somewhere around 9,500 to 10,000 contacts with youth, whether that be through programs or meetings, retreats, that kind of program, and another couple thousand drop-in center after-school contacts with the middle school students. So it was a huge year of successful programming, over 300 programs and meetings. We've had a lot of fun with the kids. We're excited about the summer. But without further ado, let's hear from one of the kids who tells it the best. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Maddie.
Like you said, I'm Maddie Moore, and I am 18, and I just graduated from the high school. Just a background, I've been coming to Croy since 6th grade, and I don't think I've stopped since, so yeah. At the age of 8, there are little to no worries that occupy the mind of a normal kid. What took me 10 years to figure out, though, was that normality is two things: overrated and non-existent. None of us are normal. We all have something to offer to those we surround ourselves with. We are more than a brain, an athlete, a basket case, a princess, or a criminal, even though we might go through phases of each. My first friend, who later became my best friend through all of middle school, was the first person who tried to influence the idea of normality on me. Though I didn't realize this at the time, this attempt at being normal was something that would become somewhat of a toxic relationship with myself. I did whatever it took to try to look, feel, and act as the normal-seeming popular kids in the zoo that was the Deer Path Middle School cafeteria. This friend would slowly influence me to change the person my family had raised me to be. I became a self-absorbed, normal princess. The princess in me was asking without giving. It was a selfish person that I didn't recognize. I was a follower, wearing clothes I didn't feel comfortable in and trying to fit into an identity that didn't belong to me. My self-confidence was that of something small and disappointing, like a nearly empty bag of Wisma chips or an empty Croya snack closet. I still remember my first encounter of the word Croya. Stamped across a red sweatshirt worn by someone I would later come to know, I wondered to myself what could possibly be so interesting behind those locked doors down the hallway. My investigative self wandered down the hall, and I poked my head into a room full of backpacks, middle school boys, and snacks. And just like that, the insecurities I faced at age 12 vanished. Normal was weird at Croya. There was and is no such thing. Once I entered into the anticipated rigorous years of high school, at age 14, I didn't have much to base my experiences off of. I found that my brother brothers and I were growing further apart as I left for college, so I was left to find my own way through high school. I saw Jack Williams stand up at my first ever high school meeting as I stuck to the walls and avoided all confrontation. He spoke about past and present Korea events and did it with an ease that confused me at the time. He had a comfort and security within himself that I only wished I could possess someday. As freshman year rolled around to a close, I saw an opportunity for my princess phase to come to an end and my athlete phase to begin. My athlete phase surprisingly didn't involve any athletics. Varsity Korea is different than most sports, lacking any element of actual physical fitness. It provided a home to myself where I worked to achieving that sense of comfort and security I saw in my role model previous that year. I slowly became a Korea kid. I was elected onto the exec board by my peers, which at the time I was completely unsure of. I thought no one noticed my small presence at Korea, but I was proven to be wrong. In the years to follow that night in April, I would find myself attending 7 retreats, 3 of which I would lead. I would find myself re-elected the 3 years following, accomplishing goals I had set for myself the moment I experienced Korea for the first time. Vulnerability is a critical factor in discovering who you are and who you are becoming. And I did the best I could to be vulnerable to the multitude of things that Korea had offered me. I broke out of my shell that I had long trapped myself inside and made new, real, and reliable friends. Friends I could count on in those low points, and friends I could laugh with through the high points. Korea made it all happen for me. I have every assurance that I would not be sitting here writing this essay had I not encountered that red Korea sweatshirt 6 years ago. I would not have made the friendships that I hold closest to my heart and had I not found and invested myself in this organization. I heard 3 years of speeches ahead of my own on the spring retreat, and I anticipated the day in which I would be given the opportunity to do the same. When the time came closer and closer, however, I found that the regrets I had heard in the previous speeches in earlier years didn't apply to my Korea experience. Seniors regretted not coming on more retreats and spending more time at Korea, but I had attended every retreat I could and spent at least 4 of the 5 days out of the school week sitting on those old brown couches in the back corner of the offices. I didn't have any regrets to share. Sure, I may have gone through and may still be going through aspects of being a brain, an athlete, a basket case, a princess, or a criminal. But Korea is the one and only thing that got me through each phase to see the other aspects of each. Korea taught me empathy, leadership, and one of the most important things we learn in peer training, unconditional positive regard. We all have comfort in something. For some, their comfort may be found in a food, their car, their bed, or maybe their workplace. Growing up, my comfort varied widely. From being a follower as a princess to my lack of being a brain in middle school, to my start of my athletic phase in varsity Korea, to my criminal and basket case phases intertwined within my years at high school. Korea and only Korea has been the constant to my often confused self. We all find ourselves lost at some point or another, but more often than not, there will be something to pull you out of the disorganized chaos that is high school. This is why for 6 years I keep coming back to those doors and pushing myself to be a better person each day. It is all because of and for Korea. I have been fortunate enough to have learned countless lessons throughout my time spent here, and I intend to take them with me into the next chapter of my life. But if there's one thing that has stood out above the rest with all the wisdom shared with us daily, it's this. We all have unspoken parts of ourselves that we choose not to tell others. We all possess aspects of many multitudes of stereotypes, but rather than running from an intimidating title given to us, Korea has taught my friends and I the importance of accepting those unspoken parts of ourselves that no one sees. To acknowledge that everyone messes up in high school and everyone gets in trouble. We all do things we are proud of and not so proud of, but the most important thing to keep with you through it all is to know that no matter the reasons or circumstances to keep you from being the most true version of yourself, it'll all work out.
Thank you. A remarkable testimonial. Take a picture. Todd, come on up. This is worthy of a picture. Come on. Here, hold that up.
He doesn't wear a tie. Good in public speaking.
Really a remarkable personal testimonial and very bravely delivered. but also a wonderful testimonial about a very important institution in our town, Croy, ably led by Todd Nahigian. So thank you both very much. Wonderful, absolutely wonderful. Next item I have is the consideration of an ordinance amending Section 32083 of the City Code, the Housing Trust Fund Board, including a waiving of the first reading and granting a final approval to the proposal. By way of background, let me mention that the purpose and action requested this evening is solely limited to amending the city code to adjust the membership of the Housing Trust Fund Board from 7 members to 3 members. So, if you go back in time, the Trust Fund Board was established in 2011 as an advisory body to the City Council on matters relating to diversity in housing in the community. There are various state mandates and whatnot revolving around all this. But unlike other city boards and commissions, the Trust Fund Board does not focus on individual petitions, but instead focuses primarily on policy programs and making recommendations from time to time to the City Council on expenditures of funds from the city's Housing Trust Fund. Now, the funding of this trust fund has arisen from a number of sources over the years, and today is primarily comes from the various community development fees that raise from apartment development over a certain scale. And I should mention that towards the end of this year, with a contribution from the Kelmscott Park project up on Laurel Avenue, the trust fund will be, I think, probably at its highest level ever, of $1,300,000 or thereabouts. In the past, the 7 members of the Trust Fund Board have included representatives from a number of local institutions interested in different housing types in Lake Forest, including Lake Forest College, the hospital, the Senior Resources Commission, and the like. But at times, the diversity of interests of this group, obviously in most cases limited to their own, limited the effectiveness and responsiveness of the group as a whole. And as a result, in recent years, the trust fund has been generally inactive. Now, given the resources that are now gathering in that trust fund, as well as some significant progress that's been made by various players, particularly the city, towards providing housing through a number of methods, I think it's appropriate that we reduce the membership from 7 to 3 to focus on a more financial and real estate profile to the board membership, because as the real progress that we've made has required those skills. And when appropriate, we'll bring in representatives from all over the community to advise and consult with the Trust Fund Board. After the newly constituted Trust Fund Board is put together, I propose that they meet and establish their goals and a work plan, and an update will be given at a future date here to the council. So again, there's no policy changes proposed for tonight. Now, related to this is really the next action, which is the composition of this newly formulated board. It has been a particular interest of Don Schoenheider, our most recent mayor, to further the diverse housing stock, the diversity of housing stock in Lake Forest. And also 2 very knowledgeable citizen volunteers about housing have agreed to join Don on the Housing Trust Fund Board. Chuck King, who has served the city in various positions, most recently as the Building Review Board Chair. He's a real estate investment advisor in housing in his day job, and also Chris Baker, Executive Vice President of Lake Forest Bank and Trust, which obviously knows the housing stock, financing, and mortgage markets very well. So, any particular thoughts or discussion? If not, I would propose a motion, or I would like to hear a motion to approve the revision of the Housing Trust Fund Board.
That would be with a waiver of first reading.
And a waiver of first reading.
So moved.
Second.
Um,
Roll call. Sorry, I need to find this in my...
Okay. All those, this is a roll call vote?
Correct.
It's a roll call vote. So will the city clerk please call the roll?
Certainly. Alderman Newman.
Aye.
Alderman Rummel.
Aye.
Alderman Tack. Alderman Reisenberg.
Aye.
Alderman Marino.
Aye.
Alderman Bushman.
Aye.
6 yea, 0 nay. Motion's carried.
Thank you. Related is the 2018 Board and Commission appointment for the Housing Trust Fund of Donald Schoenheider as chairman for a 2-year term, Charles King for a 2-year term, and Chris Baker for a 1-year term in order to engender staggering. May I ask for a motion to approve the appointments? This is a voice vote.
So moved.
Second?
Thank you for the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. And last in the mayor's comments, a complicated and somewhat significant issue has arisen dealing with Commonwealth Edison down in the Second Ward with regard to the provision of electric power behind about 25 or 30 houses on the east side of Beverly, going south from Wesley Road. And it's fairly involved question of utility easements or lack thereof, maintenance and capital renewal of the lines and so forth. In any event, the city has been working to try and get Commonwealth Edison to come forward and accept some more responsibility and activity on this project. Long story short, the right engineering, easement, and financial responsibility plan needs to be put together. It's going to take some time, certainly several months or more, to do this. And so I'm proposing that this rather complex subject be taken on as a project and endeavor of the Public Works Committee. So I'm going to assign that, and Alderman Rummel from the Second Ward and Tim from the Second Ward have spent a lot of time talking about this, most recently at the Second Ward meeting last week. I think there we'll get the proper attention from the Assistant City Manager, the Director of Public Works, and we can put more and more effort into coming up with the right plan and getting ComEd to do the right things. That concludes my remarks. The next item is comments by the City Manager. Bob Kiley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. If I could ask Ms. Banks to please put the first slide up. As the City Council knows, the city has a long, rich tradition of working closely with Lake County Forest Preserve District. And the map that's on the screen right now shows those parcels of Forest Preserve properties that are within the corporate limits of the city of Lake Forest, and they total almost 30,000 acres of land within our corporate limits, and just outside our corporate limits is probably 2 or 3 times that amount of acreage. And we're very fortunate this evening in that we have the big three, I'll call them the big three, are here to bring us up to speed on some projects that are going on in the Forest Preserve District that influence or impact our residents. And we have, we're fortunate to have the President of the Forest Preserve District, Ann Main, the Treasurer, Mike Rummel, and the Executive Director, Ty Kovac.
Thank you very much. I've never been called big or anything, so it's a real win for me. If I may, I don't believe you have 30,000 acres of forest preserve in your corporate. I thought you said you had 30,000. You meant overall in the county.
No, according to what the GIS system showed, and I think I sent it to Ty, unless it's an error, they said that the acreage of, I think you have 5 different parcels or 6 different parcels in town?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh,
In the whole county.
so much for my GIS system.
Yes. Well, anyway.
Sounded like a lot.
So, thank you for having us here, and fortunately, Mr. Rummel and I also are representatives for the city at the County and Forest Preserve. I represent the very western part of Lake Forest, and he has everything middle and eastern. So, so thank you very much. I'm trying to decide which one is easier for me to look at. Do I have a pointer or anything? I'm kind of glossy there. Can I put, there we go. Okay. Okay, there we go. All right, so we've got a couple things. We're gonna do a little tag team here. Which goes next? This? There we go. So one of the things I'm gonna talk about first is something that's just west of your corporate limits, but I think has a great impact on your residents. And that's something very near and dear to my heart, and that, is this working there? What? I pointed to the, I'm just trying to get that,
Wait for the
there it is,
laser.
there it is. No, I just wanted the laser there. And that is the Everett Road Trail right there. So there's the roundabout, the section that runs east, up over Everett Road has been there for, probably 15 years or more, and was a partnership, and has really allowed, I know, living in Lincolnshire, a lot of people, actually especially kids, like to ride their bikes up there and go to your Western Business District and get themselves some pizza or other things like that. And also, especially those people who live in Conway have used it to head out west. So what this trail is doing right here, if you've been out there we go, very exciting. Picking up from the roundabout, it's going along here on the kind of what was known as the Granger property. There's going to be a gap. There will be a crossing. Lake County DOT is going to be doing some road improvements at a later time, so that will be finished later. And then there's a portion about a quarter mile right here that cuts into Daniel Wright Woods and then gives people a great access to the Des Plaines River Trail. So not only are people in Lake Forest going to be able to get a much more direct, safer route to the Des Plaines River Trail, I think it's also going to open up, as I said, your business district to people who are here who might want to pop over and, again, go to Starbucks or something like that. We've really found that happens a lot along trails. So I know this group is particularly interested in environmental innovation, so I did want to point out that this quarter mile trail here, we are trying a new porous pavement, a different type. It's made from recycled tires and aggregate stone. It's got about 30% void volume in there, so it can absorb a much greater level of stormwater. So, excuse me. So we're trying this out. This is a little test project to see how well it holds up. Sometimes the porous, they get clogged with other things and they're not maintained. So we're giving this a try. It's also ADA compliant, and we're very excited about it. So that's our first project here. Are there any questions? I'll just keep going unless there's a question. All right. So the second project, we've got a couple things here, and Middle Fork, Savannah, and I know all of you know where Middle Fork, Savannah is. I think, does the next one give a close-up? Yeah, there we go. All right, and then nope, I went too far. So there's two things going on in Middle Fork, Savannah. The first is, if you see this boundary here with 176, Waukegan, 60, and Old School Road, this is a really important project. It's a test project or pilot project that we're doing, hope to roll out in the rest of the county sometime. And this is our buckthorn removal zone. And as you know, more than 80% of the land in the county is always going to be in private hands. So about 20% is going to be municipal or state or forest preserve, public lands. And we work, as you do, hard on your restoration. I know Lake Forest Open Lands is here. When we can spend a lot of time and money on this and do a great restoration, but if we're abutting private lands and they love their buckthorn hedge, gosh darn, that buckthorn is not going to go away in our preserves. So what we're really looking at is working with various landowners, different partners that we have, and provide education to people. What are the alternatives that they can do? So we're not mandating anything, we can't, but, you know, that's not the way to go about things. But education, what are different alternatives, and work with people. So, long-term, we'd love to be able to roll that out, but we've had a lot of success with a number of partners working here that's what we're working on right there. So we're very excited about that. Mike? Ready. There you go.
I'm here to talk about the project that probably when I was back on the council we wanted to talk about, which was the Middle Fork Bridge. The Middle Fork is a great savanna. It starts at 176. There is public access to it there, but there was never public access to the south. And so one of the things that we did when I got on the board was we looked at the Middle Fork Bridge, and this is a true public-private partnership. I want to thank all the partners, the City of Lake Forest being our lead partner, of course, Lake Forest Open Lands, who is one of our partners, Wintrust is one of our partners, the Academy is one of our partners, and some of this is on their property. Liz Uline and John Lillard both have given to this project in a substantial way, and this is to replace the bridge that was there so you can get across the train tracks. There were two issues here. People were crossing the train tracks without any supervision, and as we know, we had a couple of fatalities out there. And it was an abutment that went up, so you had to climb down, climb up, and people were getting hurt in doing that. So restoring this bridge gives you a southern access to the Middle Fork, and the bridge will come out onto Academy Drive, come down Academy Drive. We're going to be building a sidewalk from the bridge's exit, thanks to the city and their cooperation, to Route 60. And then at Route 60, we've already talked to our partner Matawa, and thank you, Ann, for all the work we've done with them. But we have already talked to our partner in Matawa, and they have built a trail from the tollway west to Daniel Wright Woods, back to that same woods we're talking about. And if we can hopefully someday get the trail from Academy Drive to the tollway, the bridge already exists over the tollway, we can connect Daniel Wright Woods to this group of people. But it is about connectivity that we're looking forward to. And the real important part here I want to emphasize is, yes, we got a grant for this, and the grant was roughly 65% of the dollars. But the Forest Reserve and your tax dollars and people who donated made this vision happen. And we at the Forest Reserve have a number of projects that come forward, and the projects that are funded and locally supported usually get the first look at, hey, how can we make this work in the connectivity? So I want to thank the citizens who have supported us on this effort, and thank all our partners who have been involved in this effort. And so that was what's going on with the Middle Fork Bridge. It is under construction. You've seen the signs out on 60. Yes, Jack, we're going to try to have this done before the BMW happens. But their abutments are in. We're now waiting for the steel, and hopefully this will be 118-foot span will be completed very shortly. The next thing I want to talk about is House Bill 534, and I'm only going to talk about that for a second. There is a greenway, and if any of you have ever been out to the dog park that's in Lake Forest, behind Lake Forest is a Mariano's at 22, and that greenway from 22 to 176 is owned by IDNR. We have State Bill number 534, which probably will take as long as the bridge and as long as Ann's road to get through. But we have this, with the bill trades all of Black Crown Forest Preserve, which is out west, for the Prairie Wolf Slough. And we, hopefully, if this ever passes, things happen down in Springfield very slowly. It's been there for 2 years. But hopefully within the next 3 years, we will own all the land between 22 and 176 along the Prairie Wolf Slough, which includes Oriole Grove. And, eventually, I'm sure with partnerships, we can complete the trail that happens through there, which is just another means to get you to 60, to get you to Middle Fork, Savannah, and connectivity. So that's what my part is. And now the exciting part is, again, with a partnership where the Forest Reserve and grants came forward, and then also Open Lands part where they had grants for their part. We are redoing the Fort Sheridan Preserve. Ann.
Thank you. That's the sound. I do just, because I don't have to do that. I want to point out, and I think people on TV may be able to see it more easily, the tremendous number of trails that you have access to here. And we've done a lot of work, and I know that you have too, but access to trails and the ability to get out and ride is not only a healthy community, it's also important for the economic viability of community. They are incredible assets. And we know from the realtors that the access to trails and getting out to biking, that is something that really stimulates interest in a community and in a neighborhood. And we see so the Forest Preserve has over 200 miles of trail. Lake County has over 500 miles of trails for biking dedicated. So just a little trail pitch there. All right, so, wow, that's pretty hard to see. Do we have a? Oh, okay, yeah, if we could make that bigger, that would be great. So, again, there's probably many people in this room who've spent a lot of time going back to the history of Lake County. I'm working with the Fort Sheridan Forest Preserve going back to 1999. So I'm not going to go back to birth on this because a lot of you know about this. So I'm just going to go back to November of 2015, and after an extensive planning process, interacting with the aldermen, the mayor, the staff here, Lake Forest Open Lands, and getting your input, getting the input of the residents and your support. We are very appreciative of your support. Oh, there? Okay. In November of 2015, we approved the master plan and started the detailed planning. And so this project is going to be everything that's north of the parade ground. And just last month, we approved the construction contract for the public access improvements. So I just want to talk about those briefly. Let me just bring this. I don't know if this is good. There we go. There we go. I just want to get there. All right. So one of the important things that we did is we got a lot of data beforehand instead of just going up there and seeing what looks nice on the board. We did a lot of data collection in terms of how people are using the preserve, how they'd like to use the preserve, and what the carrying capacity of the preserve is, as well as parking, how many cars were actually there with that parking. So we wanted to right-size our infrastructure. As you well know, you may have the capital to build something, but it's the long-term maintenance and upkeep, and that's very important to us. We don't want to build something that we can't maintain and take good care of. And you don't want that in your community either. So we redid the parking lots. And so what we've done is we really addressed a couple things. Vehicle circulation. And one of the issues was that one lane there at Gilgare Lane. So, and then vehicles traveling past, going down the driveway to the residents there, that was a problem. We also wanted to improve accessibility to people of all ages and abilities. If you had walked that trail along there, along the Hutchison Ravine, there were a lot of steep dips, there was chip path, it was not very friendly, whether if you had mobility issues or you were trying to push a stroller or something like that. And as I said, address maintenance and operational issues. We had a gravel parking lot, hard to maintain, and porta potties and just things that we really didn't, and you didn't really want there either. So what we've done is the main entrance at Gilgare there is going to be widened to 2 lanes, all right, and it's going to lead to a new 45 vehicle parking lot, and there'll be 5 accessible spaces. There'll be an evaporator, toilet, and a fully accessible trailhead over here. So one of the things you'll be able to do is from right there be able to get out on the trail, accessible trail, and get to an overlook. So if you have mobility issues, you can get out and you'll be able to see the lake, and that's really important. The north entrance, the Batman Road, which most people call it the cemetery entrance, that is also going to have a new fully accessible paved trailhead and an evaporator toilet, and there's a lot of parking. There's going to be parking up there. There's going to be a mowed 1.6-mile loop trail. That trail is there now, but there was never proper drainage was done on it. So if you've ever been out there at certain times of year, it's pretty muddy. So it's going to be reconstructed. The drainage will work, and so you'll be able to use it. There's going to be 2 new boardwalks there and there. As I said, this Hutchison Trail, right here is gonna be fully accessible from Sheridan Road, so those dips and going down into the ravines, those are going to be removed, and so there could be 2 new boardwalks along there, and converting the wood chip trail to asphalt. I know this board had said, could you try to do the porous asphalt? The price, astronomical for the section that we wanted there, so it's unfortunate we are not able to do it there. We're gonna have, as I mentioned, 2 scenic overlooks are gonna be there. The existing, I'm kind of excited about this, the existing Janes Ravine Bridge is actually going to be enhanced to maximize its years of useful surface. It's still in good enough shape, and so I think it's kind of nice, a little historic structure there, and kind of fun to look at. The remaining portion of the George Bell Road is going to be removed, so he's kind of blocked off right now. The sidewalks and curbs along Simmons Way will also be connected. So it's hard to see on this. The goal is for this area to be open, I believe, end of next year, in 18, right here. This larger area here will not be open until 2019. The reason for that, I know that's a long time, but the reason for that is our years of experience. We know that if we let people in on these new trails too soon, before there's been enough growing season, it just gets torn up. And all the work of improving in the drainage, the turf gets destroyed, and then you end up going back in and spending more money to try to fix it up. So while it's unfortunate that it will be closed for longer than I'm sure people want, it really works best with the growing season. So that, I think those were the main points there. Is there anything you want to add? So thank you for your time. I don't know if you have any questions of any of us here.
I just wanted to add one thing.
Oh, please.
These things never happen quickly. There's over $20 million of work being done here at the Forest Preserve, and there are grants in the Forest Preserve money. But Rob, if you remember, we annexed this property when you and I were on the council because we were concerned about golfers who might have collapsed on the course and who was going to be the ambulance response. So how this has changed since we were on the council and annexed this property. But it does take a long time for these things to come to fruition.
Well, and I think in the long run, a very worthy and long-standing use of the property in this passive recreation. Much better. Well, thank you, Ann, and
I'm sorry, Rabbi, one thing, I know it was important to people. People do appreciate the view of being able to see the lake. I heard that a lot on the open house. And the grasses that are going in are going to be of a variety, still native, but that will be a little bit shorter. So that people, so we heard that, and I talked with staff, and they're like, yeah, we could put native grasses, that'll just be a little bit shorter. So the safe, quick look over to the lake, people should be able to see it, so we're excited.
Question I have.
Yes, yeah.
The work you're doing here in the Fort Sheridan area, that's separate apart from the work that the Open Lands folks are doing for the McCormick restoration?
Yes.
There's no overlap there between the work you're
Well,
doing?
we talk with each other, and we know what's going on, but, yeah, these are pieces that, are gonna come together, though, in a way that complement one another, and the sum of each will be greater than, because we'll have
In terms
that.
of physical access, is the only access gonna be from the beach area?
Yes.
From the Open Lands property to get over to the Lake County's property?
Yeah, well,
Or is there other access?
yeah, well,
It didn't seem to be
we
any.
actually don't, for right now, when it's closed, the problem is that people are, and we've talked about this, gonna be trying to access things from the
The back.
beach, and we don't want them to be doing that now, when it's technically closed. But yeah, we're not, at the moment, not taking down any fences or anything like that, so I'll let John answer that.
And I just want to follow up with one thing you said, Alderman Bushman. This has been a several-year project, but the Gliffer project is the
Right,
lake
that's the other one.
portion of this project, which is we're putting groins into the water to prevent erosion. We've completely redone the lakefront. The lakefront has been closed for 2 years, and those of you who've gotten a ticket or arrested by our police, I'm sorry about that, but it has been closed for 2 years, and it will be closed one more year. But the lakefront project, which is part of what Open Lands is doing and part of what we're doing, we're both under the same grant. As I talked about, we got, each unit went out and got their own money for it. And then if you continue to go to the south, as you see the dark area going all the way to the south, that is also part of the Glypha project. So there's gonna be 2.5 miles of lakefront completely redone when this all opens, and it's gonna be spectacular.
Very good, looks, no, it's beautiful.
I have a question.
Yes.
If you're coming from east to west,
Yes.
and you go over the bridge, over the train tracks,
So we're at Middle Fork Savannah.
yes.
Yes.
How do you get to the tollway?
Okay, I can tell you that.
Up 60.
Yeah, so, I went, actually, let's see. Oh, right, we're doing, so, there is a gap there. The tollway portion, is that the one that has it? Yeah, the tollway portion is built, when they put that in there. The part from Bradley Road all the way to, St. Mary's is almost all complete. Matawa has almost completed that. So there's a gap from the western edge of the tollway over to Bradley Road that Matawa's been talking about and working on. And then there's the gap from the eastern edge of the tollway along in front of the Conway Park, business area.
So there's gonna be like just a sidewalk or something put along Route 60 there?
Yeah, yeah, but that part is not a forest preserve project, all right, because that's not forest preserve lands, but
Okay.
Mike and I have, talked to people, we try to facilitate that with various entities of looking at a vision, but that would be a super loop. Keep in mind, though, with the bridge at Middle Fork, you do have access across 60 then. Now, Conway, and then you've got the Everett Road, which allows you access to the DPR that way.
Sure.
And then you could go up to 176 for a nice loop.
Yeah. Have the homeowners associations been notified of these plans?
Well, yeah.
Well, I'm thinking if you're gonna take it across Route 60, you're gonna go kind of adjacent to Town Line Road, and you're gonna make a right-hand turn, you're gonna go through Stonebridge, and then you're gonna make a left-hand turn and go down Conway Farms Drive, which is a heavily traveled road.
Yeah.
I think it would be a courtesy if the homeowners associations knew
Sure.
of what your plans were.
Yeah, so that, we're not gonna put any signage up directing people to go through Conway, all right? So, that's something that people might find on their own. But we're not putting any signs up directing people to, hey, here's how you can, we're not doing that. I know if that helps. I'd be certainly happy to, both of us would be happy to come to the
Think
Conway.
Think about it.
And,
Think about it.
and meet, yeah.
You know how they can, people can be.
Yes, thank you, and we have put it in newsletters, but we'd be happy to do more.
Sure.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. To follow up on that, while we're in this Fort Sheridan corridor, I asked Sally Swarthout, the Director of Parks and Recreation, to come and talk about a topic that, as soon as you hear her talk, you're going to start itching. And that's about a tick problem down in the McCormick area.
Uh-oh.
Oh, boy.
So this situation came to our attention mid-spring, and I think I've been itching ever since, John Santel. So I would like to actually give you a little bit of a public service announcement, talk a little bit about ticks, and then how it's affecting one of our programs and the McCormick Ravine. So just some quick facts about ticks. We are currently in tick season. It primarily runs from spring to fall, with the nymph season being mid-May to mid-June. And I say that because nymphs are very tiny. In the next slide or two, you're going to see a picture of how small they are, and we are actually in the height of that season. The species that concern us the most in this area are deer ticks and wood ticks. But tonight I'm really going to kind of keep my comments to deer ticks because that's what is affecting us down in the McCormick area. Ticks live in undergrowth, in the long grass, and the edge of the woods. They don't really go to the middle of the trail unless they get carried there. They like that low-lying grassy area. And ticks travel. Most people think deer tick travels on a deer. They do, but they primarily travel on small mammals and birds or on their own. They do attach to deers and they do travel with deer, but really that small mammal is what carries it the most. Here is a great picture of what they look like. So regular fingertip. This little one right here is a nymph. It's literally just a little bit bigger than the pinhead. And like I said, we are currently in their season. They come out between mid-May and mid-June, and then they develop into this nice adult that hangs around till the fall. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how you could prevent being bitten by a tick. I've had some great conversations with Lake County Health as well as with John Centel and the Open Lands staff. They've been extremely informative. We went out to McCormick earlier this year and got out of the car, and I immediately thought to myself, I did not wear the right clothes. So if you're going to go out on the trails, which we encourage you to do because we have many beautiful ones in this area, please tuck your wear light clothing. That helps because you'll be able to spot if there's a bug on you. Tuck your pants into your socks and your shirts into your pants and wear a hat. That's going to help keep them off of your skin. We're going to ask you to avoid the wooded and brushy areas with high grass and leaf litter because obviously as you walk through those they can latch on. And we're going to encourage you to walk in the center of those trails. Ooh, very, very sensitive. Also, you can use repellent. I am going to say containing DEET. Ticks are arachnids. They don't really respond to a regular off. You need something a little bit stronger. You can treat your clothing. We would suggest that you check for ticks daily. Do a spot check. Get in the shower as soon as you come in from the outdoors to help get them off your skin. And another way to prevent exposure is to tumble dry your clothes because that heat from the dryer is going to kill any tick that you missed when you were doing your self-inspection. If you do find yourself with a tick on your skin, I want you to stay calm but be swift. It takes about 24 hours for a tick to embed in and pass that bacteria to your body. So we want to make sure that you, again, check yourself, get in the shower, do all those preventative pieces. But if you do find a tick, you're going to want to remove it. And you want to do that very carefully. You disinfect that area. The alcohol is going to help a little bit. And then you want to use tweezers. And the spot that you shoot for is just below the head and the mouth. And you don't want to twist. You want to pull straight up when you're pulling that tick off. And then once you've gotten the tick off, apply rubbing alcohol again to disinfect the area. And the county health department really suggests that you bag the tick in a sealed plastic bag. One, it will kill off the tick. And two, if you do develop any signs of a disease, you can take it with you to the doctor for diagnosis. So as you go, if you do find that tick on you, these signs that are listed up here on the screen, and I'll go through them, can actually present themselves any time between 2 to 3 days and a month. So the things you're going to look for is what's commonly called a bullseye rash, and there's a picture of it up here on the screen. It actually does look like a bullseye. Some of those other symptoms can include a headache or vomiting or muscle soreness or a fever. And again, this can take anywhere from 2 to 3 days to a month to present. Should you find those signs, we would suggest you should go to the doctor immediately for antibiotic treatment and a course of action following that. So in my next steps here, I said, why are we having a talk about ticks? And it is simply because Lake County Health Department did come to us in the spring to kind of let us know that they went out and did a survey in the McCormick Ravine. And what they did is they actually did a drag-through, and they picked up about 350 ticks. And of the 350, 40% presented Lyme. So they wanted to make us aware because they knew Open Lands was very busy working in the ravine, in their restoration, and they also knew that we ran a camp out there every summer, the McCormick Day Camp. So once we had the information, Open Lands and the city staff met, and we sort of we made decisions as to go forward. City staff decided that we would actually ask the county health department to go out and sort of drag for ticks at Northcroft. We had hosted McCormick Day Camp at Northcroft last year, and it did work for us. As the health department did their drag, their report back to us was in the area that we choose to use, they only picked up 1 tick. So Northcroft became a viable solution for us and the day camp. At this time, we are going to move McCormick Day Camp to Northcroft. Parents have been notified and are very appreciative that we would actually be proactive and for keeping their children safe. We also are going to educate our campers and our parents. We issue parent manuals with each camp that goes out, and in it will be information about ticks, prevention, and aftercare should you get bit. And we are also going to work closely with Open Lands to develop strategies to mitigate the issue out at McCormick, because we want to all be able to use that facility. It is beautiful. They are doing spectacular work, and our hope is that one day McCormick Day Camp will go back to its home. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Just one thought, having grown up in Connecticut, which is one of the tick capitals of the world, is, I mean, this is a transitional thought about moving the camp. This is ultimately, you hope to go back to the McCormick Ravine area. Is there a specific threshold of some kind that's been determined in making this, you know,
I think-
administrative choice at this point?
I think, obviously, it was the choice to move for safety. I think as we go forward in the next year, working with Open Lands, working with the health department, we'll determine what that threshold is to move back. As I think John would tell you, ticks are everywhere. If you go to the northern woods, you
Well,
see
yeah,
signs
that's
posted
sort of
about
my
it and
point.
such.
They're everywhere. And
They are everywhere,
it's not just a one-shot thing. It's
right. I
people
think
need to be aware of this and examine themselves, as you said.
exactly. Everywhere you go, when you're out on any of the trails, when you come in from any of the parks, you really should be checking yourself because they are everywhere. There's also wood ticks out there that are different than deer ticks. They don't carry that Lyme disease. They're a part of our environment, and so we would like to come up with strategies that would be friendly to the environment, but would also help us go back
Right.
to the ravine if we can. So I think that threshold will be determined as we continue to meet with Open Lands and the health department.
Good, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I'm wondering if John of Open Lands would have anything to add on this topic in connection with the ravine.
Come up to the mic.
Thanks for asking, Alderman. I think Sally did a very nice summary of that. I would say that we have to remember that ticks, like many of these sort of things, whether it be gypsy moths or whatever, tend to be cyclical as well. And I think, you know, nature tends to adjust itself to some of these things too. So I think this past year, with the warmer temperatures, with restoration activities that did not include burning back there, these kinds of things also sort of contributed to it. So there's a number of, as Sally said, there's a number of things we can do to sort of mitigate the risk, but I also think that we're looking at a blip in nature, and it will begin to adjust itself over time too.
Good. Hopefully it does improve.
Very good. Any other questions for either John or Sally? The one thing I learned was John's going to release a lot of possum in there, because possum apparently like ticks, right? All right. Possums are our friend, that's right. I haven't heard that since the Beverly Hillbillies, so. With that concludes my report for this evening.
Thank you. Next is comments by council members. I'd like to jump in here as chair of the Personnel Compensation Administration Committee and to report on an agreement an approval of the Metropolitan Alliance of Police Collective Bargaining Agreement between the city and the Lake Forest Police Officers. And I'd like to Shay Kalmar, Director of Human Resources for the city, to present the results of this negotiation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. As you mentioned, this was vetted pretty thoroughly this morning at the PCA committee, but I'm very pleased to bring forward for your ratification the next collective bargaining agreement for the police officers. It is a 4-year agreement. There is a wage reopener at year 4, but we have negotiated wages ranging from 1% to 2.5%, depending on the step, through some of these years. In year 2, 0% to 2.5%, and then a combination of 1, 1.5, and 1% and to 2.5%, or 2.25% in year 3. Importantly, I think one of the things we got added, which also does exist in the firefighters contract as well, is a wage reduction or a salary reduction if the state takes our LGDF. If they reduce our LGDF funds, then they automatically have a slight decrease in their wage increases. And then if there is a property tax freeze, it does go back to reopen the wage section of the contract. And a lot of the things remain the same. Health insurance, which is a big one, basically is whatever we do for the rest of the city. There's nothing special there. So if you have any specific questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Questions, Michelle?
I found it really interesting to have the trigger on the LGDF and property tax freeze. Can you give some history of the genesis of that contract term? Is that beyond our negotiating purview? Is it a broader construct, or is it specific to our contract?
Well, no, there are other communities that are trying to get language in their contracts as well. In fact, I borrowed this initial language from another municipality. So people are just trying to get language. You know, I would have liked a wage freeze if we had a property tax freeze, but I had to negotiate something a little less than that. But I was pleased, and I was pleased when we did it with fire as well, that they were willing to acknowledge. And I think, quite honestly, with the situation we're in now, it's probably a little more imminent with the police officers than it was a little further down the road, and nefarious one, or, you know, amorphous, I guess, with the firefighters when they agreed to this. So I give them credit for being willing to talk about it.
Well, I think everyone would join me in saying that we're very grateful for that leeway, because there are only so many things that we can control.
Right.
Thank you. Nicely done.
Good point. Any other comments from the council? Any comments from the public on this item? Yeah. Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion for the council to approve the Metropolitan Alliance of Police Collective Bargaining Agreement between the city and the Lake Forest Police Officers for the period May 1, 2017 through April 30, 2021. Will the clerk please call the roll?
So moved.
Second.
I can do that.
Excuse me.
You got your back.
Thank you.
Alderman Newman.
Aye.
Alderman Rummel.
Aye.
Alderman Tack.
Aye.
Alderman Reisenberg.
Aye.
Alderman Marino.
Aye.
Alderman Bushman.
Aye.
6 yeas, 0 nay. Motion's carried.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next item is an opportunity for citizens to address the city council on non-agenda items. Yeah, please. Yeah, please identify us and your address, please.
Dan Sebald, 560 Ivy Court. I'd like to address two items. First item is that I'd like the city to reconsider moving the 4 board meetings away from the core of the city. My main concern is that having those board meetings far on the west side is going to reduce participation on part of the public. I'm kind of surprised that this could save $200,000 a year. I'm wondering if maybe you could find a location, if you want to change the format, find a location downtown still, such as Corton Center or maybe the Lake Forest Historical Society. That would be a very good location for some of those meetings. The other item is I would like to see the Country Day School item moved out of the omnibus and considered on its own merits. And I could just say why if you want me to.
Please, yeah.
Okay. So I had spoken at one of the building review board meetings about my concern was the roof and the buildup of ice and this sort of thing. And another concern I have is, and this was the arts center portion of it, another concern was that if it was too white in that area, it might have like a whiteout effect during the day when the sun comes in. But overall, I thought this was a very good project, and I think the Country Day School picked a very good designer. Everything was very nice about it. Since that time, my concern is, and from what I'm recalling of the drawings, is I went to the site and I noticed that in the center, in this area right next to the Arts Center, there is a greenhouse. And I don't know if that greenhouse is going to be removed or not. If it's going to be removed, that gives me pause because that's an educational facility, and that kind of thing should fall under the aegis of the Plan Commission rather than Building Review Board. So that's my concern there.
Okay.
And the other item about this is the classrooms adjacent to this are single story. They're not in the best condition. They're unsightly with the overhead cooling units and so on. So I'm wondering, you know, if there's a place to spend money, spending it on classrooms might be a better alternative. Thanks.
All right, thank you. I might just comment with regard to the meetings is that pursuant, as I think you know, of a rather thorough study of the processes and policies of the Community Development Department, one of the key findings was that for the work of some of the boards, that frankly, meeting in this council chamber, which has almost a judicial presentation, rather than a workshop where people come together, architects, owners, city staff, to try and work through various issues on a development or of one kind or another, that it was recommended that we move it. And as simply as a matter of sort of cost and convenience and the right rooms and the right, you know, audio-visual equipment and so forth, that we would experiment with this at Municipal Services Center. So it is an experiment, it's a trial, and we're going to kind of see how it goes. You know, we have a good sense of the participation. We know what the viewership was on television, and it's frankly pretty low, quite darn low, and it is a lot of money to sponsor the televising of these meetings and so forth. It just, when you get into all the dollars and cents and people involved. So it's something to be watched and monitored, and we certainly will at 6 and 12-month intervals see how it's going. And we're sort of starting off easy with it. With regard to the Country Day matter, how should we do this? Should we maybe pull it out and Kathy Zerniak, the Director of Community Development, maybe comment on the thoughts Mr. Sebald had?
Yeah, the process would be once you reach item number 5, the omnibus vote consideration, that somebody on the council could ask that this matter be pulled off the omnibus. You can take care of the rest of the omnibus agenda and then deal with the
Okay,
matter.
let's do that.
I don't see it on the agenda.
Yeah, it's on the- in the
What
omnibus.
number is it?
The BRB approvals.
But that's the Northwestern Avenue.
If you look at item number 7, the second part of that is 145 South Green Bay Road.
Also.
That's the country.
Oh, okay, missed it.
Okay. So let us turn to the items for omnibus vote consideration. There are 7 items. The first is approval of the May 15, 2017 City Council meeting minutes. Second, approval of the check register for the period of April 22nd to May 26, 2017. A resolution of appreciation for retiring employee Robert O. Martinelli. Number 4, consideration and approval of the prevailing wage resolution required by the state of Illinois. Approval of benefit consulting services to be provided in fiscal year 2017 by Right Benefit Strategies. Number 6, consideration of a recommendation from the Plan Commission in support of a plat of condominium for a duplex at 1439 and 1441 North McKinley Road. And consideration of ordinances approving recommendations from the Building Review Board. First reading, and if desired by the council, final approval. With that, would any alderman like to pull an item out for separate consideration?
I would move that we remove 145 South Green Bay Road from consideration in the omnibus portion
Okay,
of this, of council consideration.
all right.
Second that motion for consideration outside of the omnibus.
Okay.
You should have a voice vote.
Okay, yes, so I have a second, I think,
Second.
person second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay, we'll consider 145 South Green Bay separately. With regard to the other items, any thoughts or questions?
2000.
Victor Filippini.
Clarification. One, there was a Scrivener's error that I've offered some changes to the city clerk on number 1. And
Okay.
with respect to the recommendation on number 6, it should be specific that it's subject to the recommended conditions of the Plan Commission, including review and approval of the declaration for the property. That's the condominium on
Right.
McKinley Road.
Right,
So
yes.
if that can be incorporated into whatever motion, I would recommend that
Okay,
be the case.
will do. Yes, and your insert for the city council meetings, I think, is some very specific language from bond council with regard to the formal passage of the bond ordinance for the water plant at the last meeting. Any other,
Yes, I'd like to have further discussion on item number 7, 20 Northwestern Avenue, BRB.
all right, would you like to pull that out separately? Or would you like to-
Discuss it if you're going to pull
All
it
right.
out separately, yes, sure.
Well, once you start discussing it, I think we'll...
Okay, on that one?
Yeah,
Sure, sure.
why don't you?
I've got some real concerns about this property. I mean, it's been in disrepair and an eyesore to the neighbors for years. It's had 3 different owners. It's been a site that's been under stalled construction for a year. Quite frankly, I don't know if it's possible, but it seems to me that this is a tear down or a demolition, not a rebuild, as proposed by the BRB. And I was wondering if, Kathy, could you give us a historical perspective on what's going on at this property?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. This property has had a history of disrepair. most recently, it's been in 3 different ownerships. I think each time it's sold, staff expected that we would see a request for demolition come forward. The current owners, a young couple, came forward to the Building Review Board in February 2016 with a proposal to renovate the house. The Building Review Board asked that very question. They said, are you sure? Would it make more sense to start over on this site? And the petitioners and their representative were insistent that, in fact, they wanted to restore the house. The board asked some questions about the structural integrity of the house. And the board ultimately recommended approval. The city council approved the board's recommendation. Work got underway on the site, and then within just a couple months, it became clear that, in fact, some of the structural assumptions about the house were actually incorrect. So because the work needed exceeded the scope of the approvals and the scope of the approved plans, the city staff did stop work at the site. We did request that if they wanted to proceed with renovation, that they come back before the Building Review Board and that they bring in a licensed engineer to provide an evaluation. We actually met with the petitioner's attorney. Our city attorney was involved in, I believe, at least one meeting. We did ultimately receive a report from a licensed engineer. The city also had an independent code expert look at the plans, and that code expert also raised some questions. This matter went back to the Building Review Board a couple months ago. The scope of the project had grown. The Building Review Board at that time gave the petitioner the direction to come forward with clear plans, to again consider whether demolishing the structure and starting over wouldn't in fact be a better approach, and directed that if the petitioner decided to come forward, that it be a very specific project, a project that could be finished without continuing to go on for a long time. So I think I covered my points up there without
Referring to your points?
without referring to my points. So where we are at today is the Building Review Board heard this petition for the 3rd time most recently. It came back to them with a reduced scope. The petitioner acknowledged that the rear addition, which basically had no foundation at all, no structural integrity, that element of the house would be removed. They came forward with a plan for the west elevation that would simply heal up that elevation. The result will be a very small house. Floor plans were presented that showed that the interior of that house accommodated everything that the code requires: bathrooms, kitchen, living space. And that is the plan that's before you today. Again, it takes the house down to a very, the minimum requirements for a house. The board again raised the question about, think through the economics of whether it makes sense to do this project the way you're proposing or not. Nevertheless, the petitioners reappeared before the board. The board did approve the plan. What we propose is that if you choose to approve this tonight, the petitioners have not requested a demolition, nor do they want to proceed in that manner. If the council approves this tonight, we've already alerted the petitioners that it's our expectation that construction plans would be submitted promptly, that we will certainly expedite the review of those plans, that we will conduct proactive inspections to make sure that conditions at the site are consistent with the assumptions made by the licensed engineer, and that work is proceeding consistent with the plans. If work is not proceeding, then we would need to stop work and reevaluate it. We would, on an ongoing basis, monitor the condition of the construction site. The board, the Building Review Board raised concerns about the condition of the site. Some cleanup of the site was done in response to the board's concern. and that we would require that this project be completed and that a certificate of occupancy be issued for the house before we issue any permits for additional work, for instance, a rear addition on the house, to assure that a project is completed, the house is certified for occupancy, and the site cleaned up. So that is the point we're at with the project. That provides a summary, outlines the steps we see to completion. We do understand that this site has been a problem.
Kathy,
So
are there timelines that can be put to this project?
Yes.
Not completed by, I mean, this thing has just seemed to be linger and linger and linger, and nothing gets done, and, so that would be the one thing. I had another, and the site, I mean, my sense is, I've taken a look at it, there's significant drainage issues, just the whole condition of the site in terms of the upkeep. I mean, it's kind of I don't want to say it's a blight on the neighborhood, but it's kind of a blight on the neighborhood.
There's no grading change proposed on the property. The rear of the property does hold water. Certainly if a garage was proposed or other work is proposed, we would require grading and drainage plans. Those would require review by the city engineer. The work to date does not propose that. And again, we will certainly monitor the site on an ongoing basis. All permits do carry with them an expiration date. And I think with this one, because of the work that's been ongoing to date, we need to look at that date carefully and adjust it to assure that they make diligent progress on this project.
Okay.
Okay. Unless there's further thoughts or ideas from council, I'll make a motion as follows, and then we'll follow this up with a separate discussion about 145 South Green Bay. So I make a motion that we approve the omnibus items with the modification of a Scrivener's error and an insertion of bond council specific language for the city council minutes. And as I say, withdrawing Lake Forest Country Day School item from number 7 for separate consideration. Do I have a motion?
There with the clarification on item number 6 that I had mentioned as well.
Yes, that the Plan Commission specific terms and conditions be applied to the final documentation in item number 6. Do I have a motion as stated? Or that is the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
And
I'm sorry.
Also move, so move.
I missed Alderman Bushman's move.
I didn't hear him either.
okay. I'm sorry. I
Basically,
started out making a motion. Yeah, okay. Perfect. So we have a motion, a second. And will the clerk please call the roll?
Certainly, Alderman Newman.
Aye.
Alderman Rommel.
Aye.
Alderman Tack.
Aye.
Alderman Reisenberg.
Aye.
Alderman Marino.
Aye.
Alderman Bushman.
Aye.
6 yea, 0 nay. Motion's carried.
Thank you. Now, with regard to consideration of Lake Forest Country Day and the comments made by Mr. Sebald, back to Kathy Zerniak, Director of Community Development.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. A couple meetings ago, the council, based on a recommendation of the Building Review Board, approved modifications to the south wing of the Country Day School, the athletic wing. At that time, the Building Review Board had asked for some further refinements on the changes proposed to the Performing Arts Center. Specifically, the color was mentioned. The recommendation that now comes before you is more of a grayish tone, so that white, the idea that this might be a reflective piece that overpowered the rest of the school, the Building Review Board feels that has been addressed. The exterior material will actually have some texturing as well. It will be a metal grayish color. In addition, what's been fondly known now as the fin, the element of the lobby of the Performing Arts Center that's being added, has been lowered slightly and has been stepped back so that the front elevation of the Country Day School, the main building, the north and the south wing, really are most prominent, and the addition is stepped back. And although it still is a contemporary juxtaposition to the historic elevation, the board feels like it's a strong design. The Preservation Foundation also supported the design. There was a question about the greenhouse and the conditions of the current classroom. The Building Review Board's purview is really the design and exterior materials of the new addition. The board did not get into programming. There was no proposal to demolish or remove the existing greenhouse, so I have no expectation that that program is going away. With respect to allocation of funds to the new addition or upgrades of current classrooms, again, that is beyond the scope of the Building Review Board. There's nothing that's being done to change the use of the property or to significantly change the overall campus or master plan. So the recommendation you have from the Building Review Board does recommend approval of the addition and modifications to the Performing Arts Center.
With regard to the comments on the greenhouse, there's been obviously at least an initial engineering review by community development with respect to snow and ice or other impacts on that greenhouse from this addition?
I believe the comments about snow and ice actually related to the fin element. So yes, that will certainly be looked at as we get construction plans submitted.
Okay, okay. I do note that the recommendation of the Building Review Board comes to us with a board vote of 6-0 in favor, with supporting testimony from the Lake Forest Preservation Foundation with regard to the addition, more contemporary, as you say, in juxtaposition to the historic character of the building, but apparently well within, meritoriously so, I guess. Any comments from council? Hearing none. Any comments from the public? Mr. Seaball? Okay, 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 okay. Yes, the greenhouse is to remain. Okay, with that, I'll ask for a motion for approval of 145 South Green Bay Road as presented by the Building Review Board.
So moved.
Second. And this will be a roll call vote. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Certainly. Alderman Newman.
Aye.
Alderman Rummel.
Aye.
Alderman Tack.
Aye.
Alderman Reisenberg. Alderman Moreno.
Aye.
Alderman Bushman.
Aye.
6 yea, 0 nay. Motion carries.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, item number 6 is ordinances. Consideration, the first is consideration of an ordinance authorizing the Ellowa Farm Centennial Celebration. This is a first reading, and if desired by council, a final approval presented by Mike Strong, Assistant to the City Manager. Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Before you this evening is an ordinance that formally authorizes a proposed centennial celebration event to occur at Ellowa Farm. This grew out of a request made by the Ellowa Farm Foundation during the May 15th meeting before the City Council to authorize a one-time exception from the special use permit to allow for an event up to 300 patrons. Quickly just review sort of the site plan, the request before you, and then discuss the ordinance that's included for your consideration. On the site here, just a couple of items to review. The event is planned to take place Saturday, September 9th from 6 to 11 p.m. The tents will be utilizing the existing sort of special event space area. Limited on-site parking is going to be used, but majority of all patrons are going to be shuttled in from an off-site location, which is consistent with the special use permit. No other temporary structures such as tents or other ancillary structure are planned to be used for the event. However, outdoor gathering areas similar to weddings and smaller events that have been hosted at this facility will be utilizing the paddock area and the courtyard for outdoor gathering, and we'll be working closely with them to ensure that there's appropriate emergency access for those vehicles. Proposed liquor, tents, catering are all going to be done consistent with the parameters within the special use permit. Specifically for consideration this evening is really something to allow for the exceeded capacity for special events. And in talking about this with City Council on the 15th, there was generally support for authorizing the exception, and therefore we have prepared an ordinance for your review this evening, but I did want to highlight a few conditions that city staff has worked with the foundation and some of our other operating departments on ensuring that, maybe we work into this ordinance for consideration. And one that, all their conditions within the special use permit be followed and adhered to. All permits necessary for the event to occur be applied for in substantial conformance with those requirements, such as the special event permit, the tent permits, liquor license, that those be submitted and received. Thirdly, a logistics plan has been called out for in here, and by that, what we'd really like to ascertain from the foundation is more of a detailed schedule of events, contact information for on-site staff and security, really a breakdown of what's going to be occurring, transportation, parking, security access, plans for inclement weather, communication with neighbors. We'd like copies of that correspondence that will be sent out to the neighbors as well as to the tenants on site. We typically, for larger events like this, we'll put together something called an incident action plan, and I think that's the route we'd like to go with this as well, for public safety and some of the staff internally to have that information, and the logistics plan will help provide some of that information for us. And then, as I said earlier, communication and coordination with the various stakeholder groups that are out there on the site, the Wildlife Discovery Center, ensuring that they're properly communicated with, the neighbors and any adjacent landowners that may be impacted by the event. Lastly, as was mentioned during the meeting on the 15th, there was no plan for amplified music, so we have included that provision in the ordinance. However, since the creation of this ordinance, we have received correspondence from the foundation indicating that due to a cancellation of a previous event, they would like to designate this as their 12th amplified event for the year. They are allowed 12 amplified events, and they have 11 committed. This would be their 12th. So if council is amenable to accommodating that, we would probably seek a modification to the ordinance to allow for that this evening. But if you choose to do so, it would be appropriate to waive first reading of this ordinance and grant final approval as is presented to you this evening. I'd be happy to answer any other questions you may have at this time.
I did see, just for clarification, somewhere in my emails or something, the request from LOA with regard to this amplification for this one evening being their 12th.
Yeah.
And did it actually involve music, or was someone who was going to speak or play a single instrument or something like that? So it wasn't a full-on band?
Correct, and
Yeah.
Diane Fitzsimons is here with the foundation too. She may be able to better handle that, but in speaking with her, correct. There was no plan to have a band with amplifiers. This really was a solo act that was going to be presenting and singing at the event. And there may be some background music associated with that, but not a full-on quartet or band or associated music.
Well, yeah, I would imagine if so specified.
But I think for our intent purposes, we'd like to at least call that out and make sure that's the expectation moving forward, so that it's properly communicated with the neighbors that that's indeed what they're planning to do.
No, that's right.
You mentioned coordination and communication with various stakeholders, and specifically the Middle Fork Homeowners Association. And in our material, there is a May 14th letter. And two things there. I guess I want to make sure that the Homeowners Association doesn't have any problems with it. First, in their letter, they refer to a finish time of 10:30, although I think you're referring to 11 o'clock. And secondly, this change of an amplified event. Has that been presented to the homeowners, and did they have any feedback on that?
Based on my conversation with the president of the homeowners association and other residents, and they're generally in favor of this event. I think the 10:30 that was called out there is more for ending time for when patrons need to start wrapping up and leaving the site when shuttles would start showing up. I think that's consistent with the existing authorizations that the site has. So I think the intent of that was to align with the existing parameters under the existing special use permit. And then with regard to the amplification, we have not received any feedback from the homeowners about that, only in that those guidelines for amplified music be strictly followed for the event regarding ending times and that they're allowed to have amplified music.
I guess on this issue, I'd feel more comfortable if we did have specific feedback from them, and I know we're asked to waive first reading, and if there is no time deadline involved here, if instead of waiving first reading, we can have an indication of interest of going forward, but have it again on our agenda in 2 weeks, and give the homeowners, if you'd follow up with them on these two specific points, namely we are talking about an ending time of 11 p.m. and we are talking about the amplification event, and you can better describe, I think it's an individual that you plan on having, some singing, and guitar playing for that. But that'd be my suggestion, that we not waive first reading on this.
Dick Filippini.
Mr. Mayor, in light of Alderman Bushman's comment, I know that there is a time consideration for the
Okay,
foundation.
that I don't know what it is.
And it might be worthwhile to approve this with a modification that says, unless otherwise approved by resolution of the council, which only needs one reading, ending time will be 10:30, and we'll leave the amplified music provision in there with an add-on of unless otherwise approved by resolution of the council. That way, at least the foundation will have some certainty of the exception, and those two issues can be further vetted at a future time, if that's amenable to you. I think that, and maybe it's not for the foundation, but I know that in conversation that has, the timing has been a concern of theirs, and if the 2 weeks might make a difference to them, we may as well afford them those 2 weeks to work out those two items in particular.
Although if we don't waive first reading, we still would have a vote, would we not, on the resolution with an indication of with an indication as to whether we look upon this as favorable.
No, I agree that we can defer the second reading and final consideration to the next meeting, but that leaves in a state of limbo the entirety of the celebration. If we pass it tonight and identify those two items as subject to further review and resolution of the council, they would at least have the certainty of the event with the issue of those two
With the
matters to be
clarification
resolved.
come later on the other two,
Right.
if there is a need for clarification.
Right, yeah, I think that's
I don't have
fair,
any
because
problem with
the invites have gone out,
Oh,
number one. Number two, there are contracts to be signed.
again,
and
I'm not
so forth.
familiar with the deadlines here and whatnot.
Picky.
I think we're all looking very favorably on the event. I just want to make
Absolutely,
sure
yeah.
that the homeowners have an opportunity of having their say vetted before the council.
Would you make a motion, sir, to that effect?
Yes, I'd be happy to, again, proceed on the basis of the 10:30 and an opportunity to consider further the music, but do proceed with the ordinance and waive first reading, and give the homeowners opportunity, if they want to come back in 2 weeks and discuss it further, they'd be amenable to that, I assume.
Good.
That's a long motion, but
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
This is a roll call vote. City Clerk?
Alderman Newman.
Aye.
Alderman Roll.
Aye.
Alderman Tack.
Aye.
Alderman Reisenberg.
Aye.
Alderman Marino.
Aye.
Alderman Bushman.
Aye.
6 yeas, 0 nay. Motion carries.
Good, thank you. I think that's a very good way to proceed, all things considered. Item number 7 of the agenda is new business. discussion of the city's communications program and future modifications and/or expansions under consideration, presented by Robert Kiley, City Manager, and Susan Banks, City Communications Director.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. As you know, the city's comprehensive communications plan is always sort of in a state of flux, in that we're always trying to tweak and respond to the needs of the residents of the community. And at many times I wish that this was a technical problem like a pothole that we could just fill and it would go away, but it's more of a divergent problem, and it seems like when you think you've got it straight, then something happens and you're constantly updating it or modifying it and so forth. And I think the challenge is that as our residents change, that they're constantly looking for the information they want, when they want it, in the form they want it. And with 20,000 residents, it's always challenging to have the information in multiple forms, because some like paper, some like electronic, some like a combination of both. And as we've learned over the years too, is that people want the information when they want it, not necessarily when we're ready to give it to them. And so the challenge that we constantly have, and that Susan Banks keeps her up at night, is how do we provide that most effective mechanism, and generally in the form of multiple vehicles of providing that information to our residents. And in a moment here, she's going to go through the whole list of various programs that we have. But more recently, I think we've had the experience with when Route 41 was closed for a period of time, how word got out about the closure and what the impact would be. And then there's been some other recent discussion about, do we want to have ward-centric e-newsletters, and to make that available. And included in your packet was some information from Lake County on their e-newsletter program there. But as Susan goes through this, I guess the question that I would like for the aldermen to ponder is, one, do we need another vehicle, or do we just need to do a better job of communicating the vehicles that we have? Because I think as Susan goes through this, you're going to see that there's an awful lot of opportunities out there to get the information. It's just a matter of whether people are plugging into the appropriate vehicles that are out there. So with that, Susan, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. I just have a couple of slides to help facilitate your discussion tonight. First of all, obviously we use the traditional methods of communication. The dialogue, of course, is the quarterly newsletter. We think that hard copy is an important thing for our residents to have, as well as other media vehicles. Postcard mailings to all the households, for example, the ward meeting postcards that we send out, the sprinkler-free Mondays, the town hall meetings. We use postcards for other topics as well. We send over 100 press releases annually to the local media outlets, and those come from all departments, not just City Hall. Police obviously have issued press releases, as does Rec Center and other departments. The city website news and events calendar sections on the website are probably the most up-to-date and topical places to find what is happening in the city. We administer the website through the communications team, which is comprised of members of city staff from all departments. I oversee that group, but that includes police, fire, public works, all of our departments, and they also manage their own website pages. As far as social media goes, we have 2,100 followers on the city's main Facebook page. And we probably have 12 to 14 other additional Facebook pages that are administered by individual departments, including Wildlife Discovery Center. Rec, I think, may have several, depending on whether it's the dance department or whatever. We use Twitter, which is administered by the Lake Forest Police Department, with 464 followers. The Code Red emergency notification system is something that residents subscribe to, which is on our website. And I'll take you to our website and show you how to find all these things. Constant Contact e-news And I think that's what Bob is referring to when you'll be discussing whether or not it's something that you would like to pursue or not. That's e-newsletters that go to a specific group of people. We have 6,000 contacts in total right now that either sign up to receive press releases or information about their baseball team or whatever it might be. Our YouTube channel has 441 subscribers, and that is all the video of meetings, and most recently the marketing campaign films are up there. And just to also bring you up to speed as far as what the residents use as far as communication vehicles to get their information. 52% get information from the dialogue. You can see the numbers from the website, local newspapers, online media, and e-news, which includes the constant contact, e-newsletters, and the Code Red emergency notification system. The other social media platforms that we currently do not use include Instagram, Vimeo, Snapchat. I do believe that HR has a LinkedIn account, but the city as a whole does not.
Susan, I'm sorry, going
Yes.
back to that resident survey, if memory serves me correctly, we had about a 33% response rate to that, or was it better than that?
It was over 30%, I think, not quite 31%.
Okay, I used 1/3, okay. So the numbers there only reflect those that did respond, not those
Indeed.
that did not.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. So, if you go to our website, in the lower right-hand corner here are where you can find all of our social media icons, and if you click on those, they will take you to our social media pages. I've pulled up our Facebook page so that I can go right to this particular post. This was the day that 41 was closed because of the debris falling from the viaduct. And I think we at City Hall learned about the incident about 10:35, so at 10:45, this went up on our Facebook page and on our website. And as you can see, it reached almost 8,000 people just with that one post. So we and other city departments use the city's Facebook page quite often. We quite often share information between departments, which eventually gets shared onto people's private pages, et cetera, and it goes viral or whatever. So if you scroll all the way to the top, there's the Deer Path Golf Course, which was just posted. It's not moving for me here.
May 26th.
No, it's not scrolling. So anyway, that is our Facebook page, and I'm going to go back to our website. So as I mentioned, down here at the bottom, there's our Facebook page. Here's our Twitter account, which is administered by the police department. We would encourage all residents to like our Facebook page, to follow the Twitter account, and to...
Susan, could you talk on the
I'm sorry.
city's website? Could you go back to that just real quickly? And talk about the subscribe icon?
Yes, I certainly will. It's found in two pages because as the website is responsive on the phone, these black buttons do not appear on the phone. So we also have subscribe down here as well, which will appear on your phone. But this is where the emergency notification system is, which is Code Red right here. So you click here and you can register to receive emergency notifications. Right now, that is not set up to include things like traffic jams or the fact that 41 was closed. The police department and fire departments have delegated Code Red to be used specifically for emergencies, because if people start using that system for other things, then it may not be taken very seriously when we do have a true emergency.
Can I know from, who issues those code reds exactly?
The police department working with the dispatch system in Glenview.
Well, go ahead.
Here is where you sign up to get constant contact information. So if you click on that, you can enter your information. And here are the current categories that we have set up for constant contact, including press releases and some other things. We can add and delete to this list at any time. We could add a traffic e-newsletter to use for specific instances if we wanted to. And then we have a section here to receive information from Lake County. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have anything further to ask. Yes?
Michelle?
So when someone signs up for any of these, what's our privacy policy? Do we share email addresses? Do we store
No.
email addresses?
We do not. And the communications team, with our private newsletter lists, we will confer with one another to as you probably know, Michelle, or Alderman Marino, when you do sign up for one of those things, you want to understand and learn only about that specific item. So we discuss the things that we share with one another and, make sure that it's appropriate.
In 4 years, I've never had anybody in my ward say that we don't communicate properly or don't communicate enough. Do we have any data, one way or the other, that supports whether we do a good job, average job, or whatever? I mean, is there any survey data?
The only information that we have that is most recent is what was discovered in the 2016 survey about how our residents receive information. And most people like hard copies of the dialogue or the website. I believe those were the two.
But there was no commentary on necessarily the quality of whether they were.
I don't believe that was, no.
Oh, okay.
Alderman Newman?
You and I talked about the emergency closing of 41 and whether that, there were some comments from some residents about it would have been helpful if something had gone to their phone, and who knows, this may never happen again, who knows, but it might have been an opportunity for us to communicate with residents that straight to their phones, and if Code Red doesn't have traffic as one of its categories, and I understand potential alert fatigue, but that just seemed like it was a golden opportunity to really communicate with residents on an instant basis. So is there some other technology out there that's reasonable that
Well, we
can
can
control
use,
more locally, or?
we can use our constant contact. We could set up a new category and just encourage residents to sign up for that. And we can, get information out there and let them know that this
But
was
that's not that's an email message, right?
an email message.
Yeah, it's not a text message that somebody goes, or a
Code Red is
Amber Alert level type
yeah,
of
that
technology?
type of thing is handled through Code Red. So we can talk to the police about maybe refining the options that are available to residents on Code Red.
There was the train derailment, that never got to an emergency situation, so maybe that was not a candidate for a text message, but it seemed like, to me, like 41 was. And there was a fair amount of feedback that, they don't go to the website to check before they get in their car, but they got
But they
paid.
do read text messages while driving. Well said, well said. I have two sort of observations, they're really questions, because I'm too old to know about these things. But, we have a kind of a robust roster of communications tools here. But, the times are a-changin', and it seems the world has all these different digital platforms. And so it sort of depends which decile of age that you live, that you are part of, that almost determines these days what you're using. Not everybody is on Facebook, right? And I know people who are not using Facebook for all kinds of things that they do separately. And, you know, when, I'm almost 70, when, you know, I will pass from the scene, in very quick terms here, times, you know, 10 years more, it will be the universal way is not to opt in, but that you actually, we maintain, you know, there's probably a principle for digital platforms or something, that we monitor, we maintain, we put information on them, that becomes more of a push to it, rather than you have to opt in. You gotta go to the website, navigate those 2 pages, figure out what you wanna do. And it just strikes me, because the world never beating a path to your door, and big part of our job is communicating, right? Takes two to communicate. And we do an awful lot of good work, I think, so we ought to make it really easily available, is that I look at those 2 pages, I mean, it's just a reaction from a guy who's too old to know about these things, is that I don't know whether it's the nature of the page or whatever, but those principal icons of the Facebook and a couple other things are buried down at the bottom right-hand corner, where I think I would redesign that whole thing into 1 page. The top has a huge headline, how to communicate with the city. And you make it just, you know, as simple as possible, you know, using colors, A, B, C, D, and E. And you know, the code red thing, instead of going inside something to go find it, just get it right in the front row. I mean, these are the things that people kind of want to know. And then my second thought, which is highly related, is that I just know from, well, my youngest son, who's in this kind of business, is that as the world is changed, part of this whole evolution, this dynamic evolution of communications, which, by the way, it's as Bob was suggesting earlier, is it constantly changes. I mean, every day the world changes about these tools and techniques. Is the world now is divided not just in communications. Susan Banks is the city's communications director in charge of the content, essentially, and some of these platforms that we are on, and filling them, monitoring them, and it's terrific. I mean, you go to these, you can find all you want. Many organizations now have a separate digital director who is monitoring the constituencies that we're trying to reach, on the one hand, not just people opting in, but what are people up to 10 years old opting into it, 20 years old, 30 years old, 40, 50, 60, 70, they're all different. And it's constantly changing. And so you define a strategy, a digital strategy of which ones you're going to utilize and populate them according to the constituents who are using them. And there are huge feedback loops that tell you all kinds of information about who the users are, who's following it, and in further ages and all kinds of things. I've just exhausted everything I know about this subject, but I'm just saying that I think it's more dynamic than we think, and I'm just wondering, I don't think, there's a lot of very bright people in this town, and it has occurred to me as we think this through as to whether there shouldn't be a CCC committee, which is it's a great alliteration of the Community Communications Committee, of 3 or 4 of these really smart people that just do this for companies, you know, for consumer marketing companies and so forth, and just can light the path for what we're doing. Those are my thoughts. Any others from council on this?
I have some thoughts. And
Melanie.
they're much like yours, Mayor, and thank you for those comments. I have heard from constituents who wanted more communication from the city, and a lot of it was what you are calling the push, you know, to have something come into their inbox where they're not first having to go to the city in some form to opt into some of these things. I think ultimately you're going to have to opt in, but if we can, you know, get their email addresses so we can communicate with them on a more consistent message. And I did take some time to look over the website, and I think the content that's in there is expansive. I mean, from all the different city departments like the Rec Center and the Wildlife Discovery Center. So I think the content is there, but I wish we had more people accessing it. And so I would endorse your idea of creating a committee of some really smart people who know how to do this in an effective manner. And I think it also dovetails very nicely with our marketing campaign, and I'd almost make it a subset of that, because one of the portions of our marketing committee is to make people feel good about our community who are already here. They're going to be our best proponents out in other communities to their work associates, and part of that is how their government communicates with them. So I think it's very important, and I don't see huge changes, perhaps, but I think we can possibly tweak it, and I love your idea of including some of our smart citizens in this initiative. And, you know, just even from the small feedback that we got from the county, they use not constant contact, but this Gov Delivery, which they said is much less expensive than constant contact. So, you know, just simple things like that that you learn from going into a process
Yeah.
like this. So those are my comments.
Well, let us continue the conversation. Staff's, you know, in the usual thoughtful way, will continue to be looking at this and thinking about it. And I do think the marketing campaign sort of kicks this off, because we've got to kind of follow up all this exciting draw that we're trying to create for the city with, you know, the best tools and so forth. And I think it's off to a good start, but, anything else? City manager, you'd add to the subject?
No, I think the only thing I would add, and you'd be disappointed if I didn't make this comment, is that I think when it comes right down to it, I want to know what the cost and the value is. Because I think the county they have a full, 1.5 full-time people doing nothing but that. As you've all shown in your ward meetings, the reduction in number of personnel, I'm not opposed to communicating, but it's how do we invest in communication when we're cutting in other areas?
Well,
I do strongly believe, and I think, I'm not opposed to the push, but, you know, my experience with push is, you know, I sign up to ESPN and you can push, and then after about 2 weeks, I turn the damn thing off because they push too much junk to me.
Well
And I think-
said.
Yeah, and that was my thought, exactly. I would be very cautious about how much local government push we do, because I think the vast majority of people will turn that off very quickly. So I just be a little bit careful about that.
Well, agreed, but I want a couple of definitional things. It is ultimately an opt-in, but the opt-in is which digital platform? Is it going to the website of the city, or on Facebook or other platforms? Am I opting into certain message streams that I would like to have?
Right.
And you can adjust those. So it's not a flood. And the amazing thing about so much of this is if you get it set up right, the communications content production is already there. We've got that in place with a very able team. We're not talking about adding people.
Right.
This is done for pennies. This is the miracle of all this digital platform. So it's, these are, again, as I say, more questions on my mind, and I think some others.
The platform is really determined by the user. That's the whole point. There might be 5 or 6 different platforms,
Right.
and your users could be spread among all 5 or 6 of these platforms equally. So if there's value in getting content to all those 6 platforms without having to reinvent the wheel every time.
Right.
So if they're
Then
easily
you're
copied
covering
from one to the
all,
other,
yeah.
then you've got a lot of platforms
Right.
covered.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think that's a key, is because we want to make sure that the data is consistent across all the platforms.
Right.
Because the worst thing that can happen is some are being updated and others are not, and then people are confused by what data is accurate.
Well, yeah, as a municipal government, we have a great responsibility to
Can I ask just,
maintain the quality and the accuracy of what we do, because it's not consumer products, you know?
I'm sorry to speak again, but with regard to the personnel required, I just want to point out at the county, they are doing 21 separate newsletters. They have 21 members. So presumably, we could send the same email newsletter to all of our residents, because I don't think our wards are that different. Or at the most, it would be 4 as opposed to 21. So hopefully, it would be a lot less burdensome for the staff. And I do agree that, you know, we already have a lot of that content already here. So, I just think it's worth getting a group together and seeing if we could possibly improve what we're currently doing.
Sure.
Okay, well, thank you. Good discussion. Any other thoughts or issues from the council?
Just one, I saw on a Facebook page called LFLB Services, a resident up by the high school commenting that the graduation this past weekend was one of the quietest and most orderly she'd ever witnessed. And she was thankful to the police department because normally in years past, people have parked illegally in her driveway and all sorts of crazy stuff. So it was really a nice compliment by a local resident near the high school about how well the police maintained the graduation ceremony.
It sounds like a first. Okay, well, thank you all. I have no further business, so I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.